Being poor is expensive. That sounds like a contradiction, but let me show you this chart from the Hamilton Project. Low-income Americans spend over 82% of their income on necessities, with the majority of it being housing and food costs. Now compare that to those with middling incomes who spend about 78% and high-income Americans who spend around 66% of their income on necessities. That may seem like only a 13 to 15% difference between the lowest income bracket and the highest income bracket, but the reality is that extra wiggle room that they have is going to be the basis for their financial foundation, and the more that they have this 13 to 15% every single month, it's going to compound and help them be at least financially stable. This is called the paradox of poverty. So in a country that is super wealthy like the United States, we have 11.6% of our population living in poverty, or about 37.9 million people, and the census defines this as a group that makes less than $12,760 per year, or about $35 a day for a single person under the age of 65. While there are over 15 different categories of costs that are more expensive for the poor, I wanted to go over the biggest ones today, starting with food. So take a look at this bar chart of the prices of goods at small stores versus large stores. So small stores in this case are your local bodega or liquor store, versus a large store might be something like a Costco or a Trader Joe's. The prices at these small stores on average can be between 30 to 50% higher than those at the larger store, and this can really impact you in a negative way if you're not located near a large store, which many people in the lower income brackets are not. So this is basically what's known as a food desert. It's a term that identifies a geographic area where residents' access to affordable and healthy food options is restricted due to the absence of grocery stores within a convenient traveling distance. Basically, a food desert is the result of a bigger store that's usually more affordable, like Costco, Trader Joe's, Publix, etc., not putting their locations where the lower income bracket typically lives. So what happens is that those that live in a lower income neighborhood, they're actually forced to go to the shops that are closest to them because it might be more convenient, or they might not have transportation. And those stores are typically your liquor store, your convenience store, or your gas station type of place where you can buy groceries. And the prices at these small stores are often much higher than those at, say, your local Trader Joe's, where Trader Joe's can take advantage of economies of scale and offer their customers lower pricing. In fact, I found a study that said that wealthy districts have 3 times as many bigger supermarkets as the poor ones do. And that is just honestly a result of the brands knowing that, okay, if I put my location within a wealthier neighborhood, I'm likely to probably get more sales. Since those wealthier people probably have more disposable income, Costco is going to obviously put their stores there because there's no incentive for them to put them in the lower income neighborhoods. In addition, eating healthy tends to be a much more expensive option, and sometimes when shoppers are faced with a lower cost option versus a higher cost option, especially when money is tight, they might opt for the lower cost option, which is generally unhealthier. This may be fine in the short term, but if you think about it, if you're always eating unhealthy foods, you're probably going to be more prone to obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. So as a result of your food choices, you might actually end up paying more in healthcare just down the road. Now, in terms of housing, rent can also be really expensive and disproportionately affect the poor. If you think about most landlords, they want your first and your last month's rent as a security deposit. Plus, you have to have enough money to actually pay that first month of rent. So in that of itself, you're gonna have to fork over a lot of money up front. That means if you're renting a place for $800 a month, you might actually have to have at least $2,400 in your bank account in order to actually even get the place to begin with. And let's say you actually rent that apartment within a decent neighborhood and you had the $2,400 to cough up. What if that unit doesn't have in-unit laundry? What's gonna happen is you're gonna have to go to the laundromat to basically wash your clothes and dry your clothes every single week, and that's gonna cost you an extra 2 hours of your time. Same thing happens if you don't have reliable transportation. You might have to lean on public transportation, and if the public transportation in your area is not that great, then those with private transportation as well as those with in-unit laundry are gonna save a lot more time, and time equals money, as many of us know. Another reason why the poor face a higher cost to live as well as it's harder to get by is that oftentimes the consumer finance sector will unfairly target the poor. So first, let me explain this with banking. Banking is super expensive when it comes to the service fees as well as the overdraft fees, and this is a huge reason why the poor are disproportionately affected by banking. An overdraft fee is basically the fee that a bank will charge you if you ever go negative on your balance. So let's say you have $5 in your bank account and you go make a charge of $10. Because you went negative into your bank account, sometimes your bank account will assess you a $35 overdraft fee. That's a pretty hefty penalty if you're trying to make ends meet. And if you think about who this overdraft fee actually targets, it's those with close to $0 in their bank account. So someone that's wealthier that has maybe 20K in their savings account will never even have to think about this. It can really make you feel like the deck is stacked against you when you have a low income and then all of a sudden you're hit by these exorbitant fees. So in fact, in 2022 alone, banks made $9.9 billion off of overdraft fees alone. Some customers have even reported getting hit with an overdraft fee at least 30 times in a single year. And while the $9.9 billion figure is lower than the pre-pandemic figure of $15.5 billion in overdraft fees, I still think it's way too much in my opinion. The other problem with banks is that oftentimes they just have a monthly service fee for having a bank account in the first place. For example, Chase might offer you a $0 service fee account, but you must maintain a minimum balance in many cases. And Chase, I find this really funny, they have a no overdraft bank account, but then you realize it actually has a $5 a month service fee. So if you think about that, a $5 a month service fee times 12 months is $60 worth of fees that you're gonna be paying to Chase for this service. So while you don't get hit with an overdraft fee in this account, it actually does say in the fine print that we will decline or return transactions when you do not have enough money in your account to cover the charge. So instead of getting overdrafted, you just get hit with embarrassment instead, having your card declined wherever you're trying to buy your item. Another big category that affects the poor disproportionately, I think, is the entire credit industry, so having a credit score in general. In this paper from the FDIC, they analyzed the relationship between family background and credit health, and one of their main takeaways was, quote, "We estimate that credit scores are about 100 points lower for individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds, and that such individuals are about 20 percentage points more likely to be subprime." And the fact is that if you're living near the poverty line, you may not be able to make all of your bill payments all the time. When that happens, people turn to credit cards if they even have credit, but if they're not able to pay those bills on time or make the minimum payment, their credit actually suffers and the cycle will continue and their credit gets worse and so on and so on. And when you have worse credit, everything gets more expensive as well. So APRs or interest rates are generally higher for those that are subprime versus those that are excellent borrowers. If you have a bad credit score, for example, your APR for a used car could be upwards of 20% versus with excellent credit, that might hover between the 5 and 7% range. That difference of the APR in and of itself could result in a total interest difference of $11,565 over the course of a 5-year car loan. And that's for a car that costs around $30,000 or $35,000. So imagine paying 33% more for a car just simply because you can't qualify for a good enough loan. And the thing with loans is that if you have bad credit, sometimes you might not even qualify for those loans. So those that are actually in need of a loan might actually turn to a different type of service provider to get that money that they need. And oftentimes that might come in the form of a payday lender. Payday lenders are really predatory loan businesses where they basically prey on a low-income consumer because they know that that low-income consumer really needs the money real bad that week. And so what they do is they charge them a really high interest rate for a short-term loan. These lenders often don't check your credit score or your existing debts, so that's why many people actually do turn to them. The lender might give you, say, $300 on the spot, but then whenever you get your next paycheck, you have to pay them back the $300 plus a lot of interest. According to the CPFD, fees are typically $15 per every $100 that you borrow, which means that a $300 short-term loan could actually require you $45 to pay off, which is the equivalent of an APR rate of 400%. That is pretty crazy. And I don't know if you guys noticed this, but you will never find a payday loan or payday lender place in a wealthier neighborhood. It just simply doesn't exist there. In fact, they are almost all concentrated in lower income neighborhoods. So I personally think that these are really predatory businesses. I think they should be banned. Unfortunately, I don't have another solution. Like, I can't propose any solutions. I'm just pointing out that this is a huge problem. Another issue that hits the poor is something called regressive taxes. Now, if you're not too sure what that is, let me hit you guys with a video game example. Let's say you and all your friends want to buy the new Zelda game and it costs $50. You all have part-time jobs that earn money. Now, one of your friends has a really lucrative job and it pays really well. Another one has a job that pays average, and you have a job that doesn't pay that much. Pretend for a moment now that the government implements a $10 flat fee tax on this particular Zelda game. Maybe they deem it not safe for kids, but the idea here is that anybody buying the Zelda game has to pay this extra $10 flat fee. That seems kind of fair because everyone has to pay the same $10, but actually let's take a look at it closer. So for you, $10 is a large chunk of your part-time income because maybe you make $100 per week. That represents 10% of your income. For your friend with the okay paying job, they make $200 per week, so this $10 represents 5% of their income. And finally, for your well-paid friend, they're making $1,000 per week. This $10 is no big deal for them. It represents 1% of their income, and they basically simply don't even realize it's gone. Regressive taxes are like this $10 flat fee on this Zelda game. They're just flat taxes, but the idea here is that they take a larger percentage of your income if you don't earn that much and a smaller percentage of your income if you earn quite a lot. Even though everyone pays the same amount of tax, the burden for those that are poor is actually much higher than those that have money. In real life, this usually plays out in the form of sales taxes or even payroll taxes. Those with less money are going to pay this flat tax and they're going to be disproportionately affected. You could also even say the same thing for different types of fees that you might incur over the course of your life. For example, a parking ticket. So if you're like me, you've probably gotten a parking ticket before. Maybe you forgot to feed the little meter, but essentially what happens is you get a ticket on your windshield for $50. And while this $50 fee affects everybody, if you're driving a Rolls Royce, that $50 might not even make a dent in your day at all. Like you might just look at it and just laugh and keep going on with your day. But if somebody is in a lower income bracket, that can mean the difference between having groceries this week or not. This should make sense to you because as you make less money, things are inherently harder to afford, especially flat fee items like a parking ticket. And that's why life is so much harder when you earn less. Every problem just compounds on one another and things get really hard. And if you think that this is all just a really recent problem, it's actually been going on for quite some time. So let's take a look at this study done by the Department of Agriculture back in the late 80s on the prices of food specifically. Here's what they summarized back then. Number one, low-income households spend less money in supermarkets. They're referring to the bigger markets, such as your typical Trader Joe's in this case. Number two, low-income households are less likely to live in suburban locations where food prices are lower. And number three, supermarkets in low-income neighborhoods may charge higher prices than those in nearby higher-income neighborhoods. Quote, low-income households may realize lower costs by selecting more economical foods and lower quality items. While this is a factual statement from the 80s, man, they were really dry back then and just kind of cut straight to the point. It shows you how ridiculous this is in actuality. It's like, okay, if you don't make that much money, you just have to settle for a lower quality food option. Now, this next part is really fascinating to me. It's how the spending trends have been evolving according to the Hamilton Project. They actually found that lower income households have actually started to consume less over the past 30 years, down 4.5% from 1984 to 2014. However, at the same time, the percentage that they actually spend on their income towards basic needs has risen by 2 percentage points. At the same time, the middle and high income brackets have actually started to spend more on their real expenditures, but their spending on basic needs actually went down. So that's kind of crazy to me. The poor are spending less money, however, they're spending more of their money on basic needs, versus those in higher income brackets, they're actually spending more, and they're spending less money in proportion to basic needs as well. So to sum up, I basically wanted to shed some light on this paradox of poverty, that if you are in a lower income bracket, the odds could be really stacked up against you. Let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are, and if there are any solutions that you can propose or bring up anything I missed, I would love to hear from you. Make sure to subscribe to this channel for more financial literacy content, and check out this next video on millennials and Gen Z if you haven't already watched it, and I will see you guys in the next video. All right, take care.